carry forward.
Thank you, Your Worship. Then we will move on to the next slide, which is Recreation and Culture Services. And that you will find on page 44 of the budget document or page 297 of the agenda package. Within this budget section, there have been reductions to park supplies with the elimination of some garden work and plantings. The operational costs for the splash pad have been eliminated as it is not anticipated to be built this summer season. The repairs and maintenance for the arena and the community center were both reviewed in detail, and several items are being deferred this year due to budgetary restrictions. The current and anticipated closures have resulted in some reductions in programming costs, and the small capital of either tables or chairs at the community center have been deferred. However, it is red circled in there so that staff can revisit it in early 2021 should revenue projections improve. Do you want to move to the next slide, Heather? So heritage supplies have been reduced based on anticipated need. The library funding costs have been reduced based on the new proposed provincial funding model. Public celebrations budget has been reduced based on some canceled events. And the UNESCO promotional costs have been reduced based on anticipated requirements for the upcoming fiscal year. Are there any questions on that particular section of the budget?
Any questions, anyone, about those proposed amendments? Reductions? No, none. Everyone's following along with full understanding thus far.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Then we can move to the final departmental budget, fiscal services, which you will find on page 54 of the budget document or page 307 of the agenda package. Here there are a $20,000 decrease in anticipated insurance costs based on our recent tender results. Reserve transfers have been reduced by $40,000 due to budgetary restrictions. Capital from revenue has been reduced by $58,800. Capital will be reviewed more fully just a little later on in the presentation. And both reserve transfers and capital from revenue, not like the small capital that we just spoke of in recreation, can be revisited and increased later in the fiscal year if revenues are higher than anticipated. Staff can certainly bring that forward to council during our monthly financial variance reports that we bring forward to council. And also within this budget section, there is the transfer tax revenue that is anticipated to be lower this year, which will result in a reduced transfer, which does impact funding requirements for future capital needs.
Okay.
I don't know if there are any questions in that particular section.
Looking to other members of council for questions of our finance staff. Nope, all very self-explanatory.
All right, well then perhaps we can move back to the revenue section of the budget, which is on page 3 or page 256 of the agenda package. The version 2 budget, which is before council today, has $373,400 in reduced revenues, which are mainly the result of loss of non-tax revenues, which are summarized for council in the slides. The current draft budget also contains a ½ cent reduction in the residential tax rate and a 4-cent reduction in the commercial tax rate. These tax rate reductions are in addition to other assistance council has already put in place for taxpayers, such as waiving the interest on tax and sewer accounts until June 30th, and the lowering of interest rates for overdue taxes and the adjustments for the wage brackets of the low income tax exemptions. Are there any questions of that particular section?
Any questions? And those two of those things you mentioned, I think, are coming up in our later in our agenda as well.
Yes, the policies to reflect those are there as well. Yes, Your Worship.
You're right. So if there aren't any questions, go ahead. Okay.
Okay. Then we can
Go
move on. You have to advance 3 slides, Heather, to slide number 19. One more. So if I could turn council's attention to the proposed sewer rates for the upcoming year, which are on page 32 of the budget document or page 285 of the agenda package. As discussed at previous council meetings, there is a need to increase the sewer rates for fiscal 2021 to support this budget priority and critical infrastructure. The first rate on the sheet is the staff recommendation, which is a rate of $494.60 per residential customer, which is a $10 per month or $120 per year increase. The commercial sewer is based on assessed values and has a proposed 14.7% rate increase this year. I don't know if there are any questions of council regarding that item.
Any questions of council with respect to the sewer rates that we're facing this year?
Philip?
I think I can see everyone. I'm not sure. Oh, I cannot see the deputy mayor. So there you are. If there aren't any questions, those are what is being proposed by staff, what's necessary to cover the costs of operating and maintaining that critical piece of infrastructure. Okay, I'd ask you then to carry on with the presentation.
Okay.
Stagley.
Then the last slide is regarding the capital projects for the upcoming fiscal year, which are found on page 100 of the budget document, or for those following along on the agenda package, it is page 353. Before, just so that we don't forget it, the fire department has asked for a pre-approval for the purchase of a washing machine for their bunker gear, which is to be funded at 100% from the fire department. The reason for the expedited request, I've been told, is due to the current COVID pandemic and just the need for additional cleaning of gear. And so that item is highlighted in bright yellow. It's about a third of the, 3/3 of the way down the page. If there was support for such a pre-approval, a motion would be in order, Your Worship.
Okay, so everyone's located that. It is for a $5,400 expenditure, 100% fire department funded. There's some urgency to the request, which would normally fall within our budget process. But yes, Councillor Risser, are you indicating moving that to approval of that? Yes, and seconded by Councillor Mosier. Thank you very much. Any discussion required as to the need or timing of that? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? No one's opposed. The motion is carried, and we thank our fire department for the work they do, and it's important that they are able to cleanse their gear. So thank you for that.
They will be very pleased with that, Your Worship. So then I can go, whatever is council's pleasure, I can go through all the items that have been eliminated, if that is what council's wish, though they are all indicated with a strikeout there. There is one item highlighted in orange, you will note, that was a deferral of a discussion from your April 14th meeting. That is on your agenda under item 6BI or 1. I guess I'm seeking some direction from council of how you would wish to review this.
Right. So we do all have that page 100 before us. There are a number of items that have been struck as being taken off the capital budget list for this year because of changes to our financial situation. And as Ms. Dagley noted, the Tannery Road question about funding or amount of funding for that project is a discussion further on in our agenda. But other than that, are there questions we have about the items that are crossed out, or would you like a description of each? I'm not getting that sense that there's a need to go through them one by one. They are clearly defined for us and they're clearly outlined in the document. And the total budget is listed there, the capital budget, and the changes are noted.
That is correct, Your Worship. There's a total capital budget of just shy of $2 million.
Yeah, 1,938,400. So are we? There's no concern about the items that were well, no undue concern, I guess, about the items that have been selected by our staff for removal from the capital budget. So I think we can continue on with other budget discussion items.
Okay. Well, if I may, Your Worship, then I think that within your agenda, the next bulleted item after the fire department pre-approval was talking about Coastal Action Foundation, Tannery Road Green Space Plan, etc. And yes. I would defer this to our CAO, Ms. Renton. This was in relation to a proposed funding application to the province for under the beautification program. So perhaps Ms. Renton can provide you more detail on that.
Okay, Ms. Renton.
Right, Worship.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are 3 items there that Ms. Dagley noted that could possibly be put forward for council consideration and provincial approval for the beautification program. Typically, that's 50% funding. The deadline is coming up. We can write a report if you would like, but it was thought that it might be helpful, kind of given our current budget scenario and many of the unknowns that we're facing. If any of these were of interest to council, the one, of course, is for Tannery Road that you've been speaking of for some time with the seawall repairs. And there was an additional document that was added to your agenda for a report to be done by Coastal Action Foundation at $1,200 for them to come up with another design. This would be the 3rd design, and sort of a plant layout and other landscaping elements. And then that would go forward for provincial approval. And then there was one for Blue Nose Drive pump station, and Mr. Bracken prepared some cost estimates for that to see if you were interested. And then earlier on, Coastal Action Foundation prepared a sketch, a beautiful sketch for what the 2 traffic islands / stormwater retention areas could look like if they were planted with plant materials that were specifically designed for both drought and to attract butterflies to the area. So that has been, that's put forward in the agenda package for your consideration, Your Worship, if any of those are of interest.
Thank you. So that material is there. Would I'm ask for clarification on the funding for that? Typically 50% funding was mentioned. And so so our portion, should these applications be successful, are not then currently included in the budget that we're looking at? Is that?
They are in some ways, Your Worship. So
Okay.
the Tannery Road Seawall project, which is just about halfway down your page, it's under renewals, sidewalks, curbs. It's in the amount of $70,000. And that is to be funded from deed transfer tax. The thought was that $70,000 would also include any beautification plantings of that as part of that project. So that funding would already be in place in that budget, should council proceed with approving that. Just below that is also the Blue Nose Drive beautification project, which is a new addition to this version because of these discussions. And the funding for that would come from deed transfer tax. I guess it would probably be in either the Brook Street or the Blue Nose Drive. There probably would not be financial capacity to do both of those this year, Your Worship.
Okay, with that in mind, is there council preference or staff guidance as to the desirability, or the maybe even considering the dollar amounts involved that we pursue? Or is it prudent to pursue both and see where we might land as far as approvals are concerned? We can always, although it's difficult, turn down money, but you can't generate it if it's not offered. So yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, just with regards to the Blue Nose Drive, I see that's cleaned up very nicely. They did a nice job. It's neat, tidy. I don't know if there's any need to go any further with that at this point in time, especially if we're limited in picking and choosing one. I'd suggest that one is looking pretty good.
So thanks for that. With the so with thanks to staff, it is. I just happened to notice. I don't know when it was done, but I just happened to notice it the other day when I was walking, and it does look very neat and tidy. But I'm not sure if staff have thoughts on further work that was intended for that area and its desirability or not. Councillor Bachman, and then the Deputy Mayor had wanted to speak as well.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Mosier. The town staff have done a great job of cleaning that up, and it looks tremendous compared to what it used to. When I was down kind of checking it out, there's still a few things that if town had staff, Public Works had the opportunity, a little bit more cleanup between the pump house and the waterfront might be able to take place. But I also agree that to spend any amount of money on that one right now, I would certainly take that one off the table.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just back to the seawall. I would like us to remain that being a priority. We're almost there, so I wouldn't like to see that taken out.
Thank you. And I think just to clarify, the seawall, that work is continuing, is it not, as part of our ongoing operational plan? Maybe I stand corrected, but I looked to staff for clarification. I think this is specifically to the beautification portion of that project, but
it's a bit of both, Your Worship.
Okay.
So the Tannery Road Seawall project has been ongoing over a number of years. And each year a budget amount has been approved. Some work maybe I'm not and Mr. Tillert may be able to tell us, there may be some work ongoing right now, which is just a carryover of the unexpended funds from the previous fiscal year. This amount that is there, the $70,000, is obviously not just for beautification. It is for a component of the seawall work, as well as incorporating in a beautification plan for finalization as well.
Great. Yes, Councilor. Oh, sorry, Mr. Tiller, do you want to speak to that, please?
Yes, Your Worship. Just a quick thing. The coastal action proposal is for the surface area up top. That is the park area, for a design for that park area. So that's specific to that. It's not really independent of the seawall project, but it's we had a design which I think was forwarded to council at some point that was just an internal thing. I had contacted Coastal Action, and they had proposed that there's some things that would be nice to do there, and we'd be happy to help out with the design. And that, so the proposal for I think it's $1,000 or $1,100 was for them to actually do that design for us, so that we could then carry on and with our project. So on the park area only is what that's referring to.
Okay. So I guess oh, sorry, Councillor Mosher, you go ahead.
Well, just in keeping that we have limited resources, I would say that we would want to continue the structural work on the seawall at Tannery Road, obviously, because it protects infrastructure. But if I were to weigh in on beautification, I would take the Brook Street / Victoria Road area, because it's a throughway or a main artery for Lunenburg to come into town, into Old Town. And I think there, the beautification, you get more bang for your buck.
Can I just weigh in, Your Worship, just to say that, so we would be able to have the deed transfer tax funding for our 50%, if Brook Street was considered, if Blue Nose Drive was deferred to a future fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I may need some clarification on their 3 sites, and I'm not sure what direction staff needs from us, as far as we're always open to financial help and partnerships where they may be available to work where we intend to carry out. So I'm not sure what direction staff needs to seek that. I guess there's lots of options. And so are you looking for us to prioritize? I guess I'm not exactly sure where we need to go.
The latter, Your Worship. Yeah, to prioritize. We could submit an application for all 3 projects, but it's unlikely they would be funded, because I think the funding is limited to $25,000, Ms. Dagley. So of those 3, what ones are the top priorities? And they would all have benefits. I think every aspect of those would be, an attractive addition to our green space in the community, and help address some other issues related to those locations. So, but probably in order of priority, the seawall, I think, to complete that. And then either the Blue Nose Drive, because we started that, and Brook Street, because the planting that was part of that tender for that infrastructure program left it with sort of a mixed seed, and it hasn't taken particularly well. And it was thought that some plantings that might be more suitable there for a fairly arid situation, and also perhaps attract butterflies and bird life, might be a welcome addition to that area of the community. So yeah, I guess in first order of priority, it would be Tannery Road to complete that. And then a toss-up really between Blue Nose Drive, if you wanted to do put a gabion wall there, do a little bit of a retaining wall, put some additional park furniture there that Paul's and Mr. Bracken set out, or switch completely to Brook Street and do some upgraded plantings there. So.
Okay, so a 1, 2, 3. vote is what we're looking for from council. And I don't know if
Yeah.
Councillor Carnevale again raised his hand or was just gesturing otherwise.
I just wanted to also, with Councillor Mosier, Peter Mosier, to go with the Brook Street, because I think, like you said, it welcomes people into the town. So my first on the list would be a Brook Street planning area.
Okay. Councillor Mosier, you wanted to speak about that?
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion to get this thing rolling, Your Worship. I would move that we source funding for the continued construction of the seawall along Tannery Road and for the beautification of the Brook Street, Victoria Road area.
So that, thank you for that. And is that a second from Councillor Rister? Thank
Can
you.
I just say, Your Worship, the funding, the beautification funding would not be for the physical construction of the seawall. It would be for some plantings and some of the park area once the seawall work is completed, just for clarification about the funding application for beautification program.
So for further clarification, the funding applications that we're seeking are for beautification projects. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, so
Well, I could reword that then to say that we'll continue the construction of the seawall on Tannery Road and we'll seek funding for the beautification of Brook Street, Victoria Road.
and with that amendment, Councillor, or I guess it was a motion of, or a, once it was seconded, it's everybody's motion. Is that how you say it, Councillor Rister? But that's a somewhat significant amendment. Not speaking to the beautification on Tannery Road, but speaking solely to the beautification of the Brook Street. Brook Street, Victoria Road area. So that's the amendment we're looking at. So Councillor Bachmann, I believe, had wanted to speak to that. Someone had raised their hand.
Thank you. Just a point of clarity. I agree that we need to pursue the funding for the Brook Street, Victoria Road. If we can get 50% on the dollar, that would be ideal. I think that place would definitely need some beautification. Secondly, if we can apply for beautification for work on the Tannery Road park side of things, I think that's great as well. I know right now Coastal Action has a request in for us to approve $1,200 for their design for that park work. And I don't know if that can be covered out of the 70,000 that we've got set aside. I'd like to see that happen now. If not, then I think we need to kind of include that in our sort of application for the beautification of that area as well then. So I don't know if we need a little clarity from Ms. Renton or Mr. Tillard, if we can get that 1,200 or sorry, Ms. Dagley, if we can get that 1,200 out of the 70,000, or if we need to seek funding for that as well.
So we would, in my opinion, Your Worship, we certainly could incorporate that $1,200 within the $70,000 budget. I think within that $70,000, there is still a component for beautification of that park area as well. So there could be, if council had a desire to ask for both in the funding, the beautification funding.
So there's probably ability for 2 of the 3 projects to be funded with what we have in our budget right now. Is that what you're?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Okay, yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, that was sort of my intent with, just folding in Tannery Road. I mean, it's, obviously the construction's a priority. If there's any money left over, well, then obviously we could do beautification.
Your Worship,
Okay.
perhaps I could read the motions and or amendments that I've tried to capture as the discussion goes along. So
That would be
it might
Much appreciated.
Okay, yeah. And yeah, I think this also illustrates the importance of having a staff report if things should otherwise change. So thus far, Your Worship, I have moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Risser, that we source matching provincial funding for the landscaping of entranceways to the community, including the Tannery Road seawall, with town budget pre-approval for Coastal Action Foundation to first prepare the landscaping plan, plus Brook Street Victoria Road green space as set out in the preliminary documents, I think I need to say.
So they've already provided the plan for that part, basically.
Yes, indeed. For
Drafted
Brook Street Victoria Road, it came within the 2019-2020 budget for landscaping that we had. There was a fee of $500 that we were charged for that smaller area. And has already been paid, yes, Your Worship.
Okay. Yes. Councillor Mosher?
Just the way he reads that back, I just want to reiterate that as long as it's the priority to landscaping goes to the Brook Street area first, that's okay. The way it's read, it almost sounds like Tannery Road comes first. So that would be my
Okay,
only.
yes. I can certainly change that, Your Worship.
Okay, so the priorities that Councillor Mosher is putting forth are for Brook Street, Victoria Road to have top billing, and the Tannery Road project for beautification have second, but the infrastructure is of primary importance. So that is the motion as I think we have now captured it, and is hoping that Councillor Risher is not opposing any reason to not continue to second. So we have an amended motion after some careful review. Any questions or further discussion on this item? I'll call for the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? No one's opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully that gives appropriate direction to staff to move on those items.
Certainly, Your Worship will carry forward to apply to the province for those items.
Great, thank you. And yes,
I
and
just
carry
have
on.
one last item, I guess, we've moved through the whole presentation, Your Worship, and I guess I was just going to propose some revised dates for our budget approval schedule, because obviously we've gotten a little off with COVID-19. So this budget that is before council today could be posted to the town's website and advertised over our social media platforms. And written public submissions could be submitted to my attention, and that there would be an opportunity for responses to same within the May the 12th council meeting. And then we could bring forth the budget on May the 26th for council's consideration for approval and setting of the tax rates.
So yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. Lisa, the 11 days starting tomorrow sounds like a kind of a short window. Is there anything we can do to lengthen that?
Well, I suppose we could. Obviously our budget process has been going on for some time at many public meetings, but if council wished to extend the opportunity for written submissions to right through to May 26th, that could be made available as well.
I'd move that.
Could you clarify, Councillor Risser, you would move that we
Take in submissions for responses at the 26th meeting rather than the 12th, and that I presume then the budget approval would move back one more meeting as well.
Could I suggest that perhaps they could both be considered in the same meeting of the 26th?
Sure.
So is there a seconder for Councillor Risser's motion? Yes, Councillor Bachman seconds that. So discussion on that motion?
And your worship, we'll need to
Yes.
read that back.
Oh, okay,
If you
please,
don't
yes.
mind.
Yes,
Okay.
you could do that
Let's
right
submit
now.
this
Would
then,
you, could
please.
you? Sorry?
Yeah, that's okay. Yes, please, your worship. So moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that we take in submissions, and I believe that by that meaning public submissions for the April 26th meeting or until the April 26th meeting, and the budget be potentially approved at that meeting. That's where I get a little lost.
Yeah, we're in May, so you said April 26th, I think you mean May.
Mm-hmm.
So given that it was until May 10th B, I assume we would have it
May
until May
10th?
24th with responses at the original was May 10th and 12th. So I assume
Mhm.
the amended would be May 24th and 26th.
Okay. May 24th. I'm not sure if Ms. Dagley can maybe help me with those dates as well too, your worship.
It would be May 12th, to clarify, was the proposed meeting. But yes, sorry, you go ahead, Ms. Dagley.
So I believe what Councillor Risser has moved is that not opening public submissions, written public submissions on the budget starting tomorrow when we advertise, up to and including May 24th, with an opportunity for responses to those submissions at the May 26th meeting, and also proposing that at the May 26th meeting, there would be consideration by council to approve the budget and set the tax rates at that meeting.
Thank you.
So that's been moved and seconded. I just put the question to councillors, what we, in the real interest of trying to approve a budget that staff have figures to work with and to operate within as soon as possible, and with respect to ensuring that our public have opportunity to review the document and provide us with any questions or concerns or insights that they might want to offer. I'm wondering, and being fair to staff and giving them an opportunity to be able to respond, or to be able to give more information to us and to the people who may be asking in a transparent way, which we're still trying to figure out a little bit in this new world we're in. I would question the length of time. We're still in April. So if we give them 2 full weeks in the month of May, and close out any opportunity for public submissions on, say, the 19th, which is a Tuesday as well, that still gives a full week before we would have another council meeting on the 26th, which is when we had hoped we might be able to approve the document. And I'm just with logistically and with trying to deal with this new world we're functioning in, I just want to, it's sometimes difficult to respond in the typical fashion we would have. So I would be much more comfortable with that than what's currently proposed. So I'm just throwing that out there for further discussion or consideration. Any other comments or? Yes, Councillor Bachman.
For me, the public submissions is not as big a deal as trying to get the budget passed. So the 12th or the 19th for the citizen input, the 12th is okay, the 19th is okay. For me, I think we need to get on with trying to get the budget done. So the earliest date we can appear to be do that so far is the 26th. So that's my main concern and for wanting to second the motion.
Any other thoughts on this? Yes, Councillor Croft.
Just wanted to call for the question.
You wanted to call for the question? Okay. And I'm not seeing any opposition to that. So all in favor of the motion as we've heard it, and does anybody need to hear it again? Or we're clear? Ms. Renton, would you mind?
I would feel good about reading it again, Your Worship. So moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Bachman, that we receive public submissions until the May 24 meeting, with town responses provided at the May 26 meeting, at which time the budget may be potentially approved.
Okay, just, there is no meeting on May 24 because that's a Sunday.
Yeah, I
So-
don't know why that date was mentioned.
The
Councillor
date was
Risser,
mentioned because Lisa had 2 days in between the original dates. So the cutoff was May 10th for responses at the May 12th meeting. So I just
May
copied the initial.
25th.
Oh, so,
And
So
I have
that's-
to say, looking at the calendar, Your Worship, I don't know why I had May 10th to start with. It probably should have been the Friday before the council meeting, rather than the Sunday. I may have been looking at April as well as Ms. Renton.
so Councillor Risser, could I ask if you would mind, or if it would be within, in keeping that you were trying to follow Ms. Dagley's direction, the 22nd, which would be the Friday before, if we could change the motion to read public submissions remain open to May 22nd, Ms. Renton, and then budget to be responded to on the May 26th meeting, at which time the budget may also be approved. Does that make sense?
I made that revision, Your Worship, May 22. Yep, if that's all right with everyone.
And no one's objecting to that alteration or clarification, I think, is really what we're trying to do. Okay, so all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion's carried. So I guess what I would ask, just in further clarifying that, we'll be open to some public submissions until the 22nd, but will there, I would expect council may hear commentary or is open to commentary, and staff are available for questions before that, because we may want to take opportunity to discuss this document further, as this is I wouldn't want to hold it all off until the day when we want to set tax rates and get budgets approved. So they may very well appear on a future agenda. So back to the agenda and move to calendars to try to clarify where we are. We're getting near our time. So we are finished with our budget discussion. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Your Worship, I was wondering if I could ask staff, Lisa and Kathleen, if they could put out a document, a one-page document that would show department totals only on a 1 or 2 page submission.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We're not able to hear you.
I'm having technical difficulties. I don't know if it's the Wi-Fi or what's going on. Just wondering about a one-page document that would show department totals. For example, general government, just a department total on the expenditure side, and then list all the expenditures down through for all the different, for just the department total expenditures for each department, and then another section with revenues. Does that make sense? Can you understand what I'm saying?
I understand. Yes, we prepared this in previous budget years, Councillor Croft. Is this something you wanted that could be posted to the SharePoint site at any point, I guess?
Whatever's the easiest way to do it, I guess, to review that.
Perhaps, Your Worship, could I suggest that, as you just mentioned, maybe at the May 12th meeting, if there is opportunity in your agenda schedule, that we would bring this forward and any public submissions that have been received to that point in time for budget discussions?
I think that's a very reasonable way to proceed. And I would certainly encourage anyone who has questions, who wishes to have input on this important public document, to do it at their earliest convenience, so that we can respond to and consider anything that any new information that may be presented. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Lisa. Are you in the office most regular work days that if we wanted to call about the budget?
I certainly am on site many of the days during the week, but even if I'm working off site, I'm still available by phone and email as well.
Great. Thank you for that. We have some bolded items we need to get through. So perhaps we could, but there's one item that I don't think will take very long just before that, to try to stay in order and try to continue with the items on our agenda, and that is we have Mr. Brook with us with respect to municipal elections 2020 and returning officer draft resolution regarding proposed elections, tariff of fees and expenses. Is council able to deal with that today? Or is there any questions or thoughts on the resolution that's been put forth? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
No questions, Your Worship. I would just move the resolution.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Visser. Any questions of Mr. Burke with respect to those fees that are being proposed for the election? Just trying to find it quickly here myself, so I make sure I know what we're voting on. So it does anticipate that the election will be held on October 17th, 2020, and we are required by the Municipal Elections Act to set these particular to engage these people at that certain amount of remuneration, and those have been proposed. Yes, Mr. Burke.
Your Worship, just for the information of council, in the interest of austerity at this time, the amounts on the schedule are the same as in the 2016 election and the 2017 by-election.
Thank you. And I understand from consulting with staff earlier about this that there was some comparison shopping done when those were set to determine that we were in the ballpark with others.
I'm not sure about that.
So are we ready for the question, or are there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None. None opposed, so the motion is carried. Thank you. So there are two bolded items here next on our agenda. The draft revised policy number 66, interim and final tax billings, and the Deputy Mayor was putting forth a notice of motion.
Yes, Your Worship, notice of motion on the proposed adoption of amendments to the policy number 66, interim and final tax billing. And I'm happy to say that we're looking to reduce the penalty percentage from 2% to 1.5% per month.
Thank you. So as Ms. Renton, is that duly noted that we have notice of motion to go forth for our council meeting on May 12th?
That is correct, Your Worship. It will be recorded as such.
Thank you. And next we have a draft revised policy number 77, and that's a notice of motion is Councillor Mosier, I believe, will put forth.
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, we'll give notice of motion for proposed adoption of amendments to policy number 71, low income property tax relief at the May 12th council meeting.
Thank you very much for that. And Ms. Renton will duly note, and we will look forward to dealing with that at our May 12th meeting as per policy. Looking again at our time, I hope council will consider that with some technical difficulties, we've been set back in time somewhat. So maybe we'll allow ourselves the luxury of dealing with the other bolded items on our agenda first, which move us down to agenda number 8, consideration of council in camera meeting recommendations. And there were 2 from previous council in camera discussions, which now need to come forward to public session. First is from a meeting on February 25th. So is there someone who can move that that recommendation as a motion of council? Yeah, Councillor Mosier, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Risser. So there we're looking to resolve a lease with Nevermore Press. Is there any discussion or need for further discussion on that motion? Doesn't seem to be any, so all in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And the final one from a meeting on May 31st, 2020. Is there a mover for the recommendation following a discussion at that meeting? Councillor Bachman. Is there a seconder? Councillor Croft. And that's with respect to the farmers market and reopening town facilities, which wasn't deemed to be wise at this point in time. Any further discussion on that motion of council now that it is a motion of council? Seeing that there is none, I will call for the question. All in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried to the deputy mayor and myself voting in opposition, and but the motion is carried. And that is the conclusion of our bolded items. We are just past 4:05. There are still items on our agenda, and so I look for members of council for direction on returning or moving to returning to the agenda to deal with other items, or and therefore extend our meeting, or to adjourn. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn. Is there a seconder? Councillor Croft seconding that motion, not to be debated, but just to mention that then the other items will be deferred to an upcoming meeting. So all in favor of the motion to adjourn? Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks everyone for your participation.